Welcome to the MCM Student Business Show hosted by Dr. Kevin Christie and Dr. Gage Winkles, with a special clinical segment by Dr. Mark King. The show for chiropractic students and recent graduates, designed to help you become a thriving chiropractor.
All right, Kevin, so our topic number one here for today's episode is regarding business. What information do you have surrounding buying your office space?
Yeah, in today's show, we're going to really discuss some of the things that we talked about in our latest mastermind in Arizona, which was great. And we're not going to necessarily have student questions, but these will apply to you. And one of the topics that was discussed during the mastermind is buying an office space, right? So a lot of chiropractors have an opportunity to buy their office space. And the first thing I want to say is it's a really great opportunity if you can do that. But it doesn't mean you have to do it. I know many chiropractors with great careers, plenty of retirement, who didn't buy their office space. It has to make sense. So I want to get that out there in the open. But a lot of positives, right? You don't have to worry about your rent going up anymore. There's tax advantages. It's an appreciating asset that grows. And there's just a lot of benefits around it. And you need to prepare for it. And it's usually not something you're going to do early on in your career. I was about 9 years into my career, and sometimes it's a little bit longer. But it can be very beneficial for you. You just want to make sure that you do not sacrifice your practice for the real estate, right? Like, I've had people say, like, I can buy this office space, but it's going to be 7 miles from my current office. And it's in an area that's not the same type of marketplace and area. So that's one example of, you got to make sure there's congruency between the space and your clinic, right? You don't want to buy too little space because it's too expensive, and then you outgrow that. Now you're hemorrhaging money in your practice because you've got a growth capacity. Or we see people, they buy too big of a space and they don't really ever grow into that. So you want to make sure it's right. And then you just got to save money. You're going to need about, SBA loans are usually pretty friendly for this. And you just need to show a few years of business history. You need to show that your practice is going to be at least 2/3 of the renter, typically, okay. Right? So they're not going to give you an SBA loan to then rent it to some other entity, yeah. Right? They want security, and your healthy practice is typically the security of the real estate, if that makes sense. And you'll need about 15% down on what the purchase payment is, plus there's going to be added costs, closing costs that occur, maybe some furniture, fixtures, equipment. My loan was kind of a 4-parter. It was the real estate amount, it was the build-out amount, then it was furniture, fixtures, and equipment, because typically if you move into a bigger space, you're going to need all kinds of new furniture and equipment. And then the fourth, they attached a little unused line of credit at the end. Just, again, they're trying to protect themselves. And build out can go over. And so you'll need to kind of start the process of seeing what real estate's like, how many square footage you're going to want, try to plan 3 to 5 years in advance at least, and something that can really be a big chunk of your retirement down the road. But I would say the vast majority of chiropractors have very successful careers and don't own their real estate, right? Sure. So I don't want to be like 75% of successful chiropractors own real estate. It's way less than that. It's a nice thing to have, and it can be a good thing, but it's definitely not an important aspect of your overall career. It's just definitely a nice thing if it makes sense.
Sure. All right, Kevin, so our second topic of today's show surrounding marketing. Yep. What is the difference between SEO and AEO, and what do you want to consider with these?
Yeah, so you might hear it AEO and GEO, same thing, but SEO is your typical search engine optimization. That was Google, right? And the thing I want to talk about here was your SEO was keyword heavy, right? It would say like Boca Raton chiropractor, neck pain Boca Raton, best chiropractor Boca Raton, like that type of stuff, short to the point, Achilles tendinosis, blah, blah, blah. And then AEO or GEO is going to be essentially AI search. Okay, so people are now using AI prompts to find their chiropractors and other things, as we know. I think we're all using it now, but we're getting patients that are searching for you, based on a lot of different prompts. And I use the example of my first patient this was a couple years ago now, who found me on AI search. I asked him, because I was like, what did you put in there? And he said, find me a chiropractor like Dr. Chris Fox that's in West Palm Beach, but practices in Boca Raton, Florida. Because his daughter was seeing this doctor up in West Palm Beach, which is about 35, 40 minutes from us. And he didn't want to drive all the way up there, but he wanted someone like him. Yep. And our clinic and myself popped up. And that's a really good answer because, frankly, I even learned from Dr. Chris Fox at one point, right? So we have a very similar practice, and it gave him a really good answer. And you can see how his prompt was a lot more specific and longer, right? So it's they're putting in a prompt. A lot of you know what that is now. That's a whole lot different than Boca Raton chiropractor or back pain Boca Raton. And so you need to start considering creating a lot of content for your website and for social media that really answers the question when people prompt that in. And what I did actually, and this is, if you're a student, you don't have this yet, but I'm sure we have some DCs watching too. If you like your website and you like the content on there and you like the condition pages and services on there and the story it's telling, you can do this. And what I did is I plugged in our healthfitchiro.com URL and I said, give me the top 30 prompts that someone would look for to find our practice. And so it scoured our website and it developed prompts. And they were pretty good. I cleaned up a couple, but it was good. And then from there, I could use that and create content around it to get onto our website and get out there so that when people do use those prompts or somewhere similar to it, then we will show up there. And now the game has changed where we definitely still need to do SEO, but we also need to optimize for artificial intelligence. All right, for our MPI segment, Mark, we're going to ask a question of, palpation and adjustment is the bread and butter. That's the table stakes. You got to get good with your hands on that. That's what our core product is. But if you had to add one more thing after you felt like you're really doing well with that, what would that next technique or training or certification be?
Well, this is a really important question, and it's one I get a lot. We obviously at MPI want us to have foundationally this palpate and adjust skill set, and then you want to add to that. Now, I have a bias on this because my brain works a certain way. I always talk about how I want to rule out bad stuff. That's being a great doctor. And then I talk about mobility, stability, biochemistry, and then other. So my natural kind of next class, and everyone's going to have their bias. So this is not a right or wrong kind of answer. This is kind of how my brain works. Because of the mobility thing, I think of MPI. And you can also increase mobility with soft tissue techniques and various stretching techniques. And then the stability part, for me, I'm biased toward DNS, so dynamic neuromuscular stabilization. So for me, that's going to tend to be my second tool after palpate and adjust. Now, that doesn't, like I say, that doesn't mean for everybody. You go through some of the list of things. With palpate and adjust, soft tissue is a great combination. A lot of people want to do MDT, mechanical diagnosis and treatment. It does such a good job with categorizing your patient for what's their directional preference, and then it makes it especially easy for sending them home with a take-home exercise. Functional movement screens, you're weak here or you're tight there, and here's the exercise that goes with that. And I always feel like with functional movement screens, FMS, that, boy, if you're a chiropractor and good with your hands, you can really combine that manual care with the rehab, and that's a really strong combo. A lot of people take palpate and adjust and combine it with dry needling, or they take it even further and do acupuncture. But more commonly, chiropractors are combining it with dry needling, combining their manual care with dry needling, and that's a great combo, very formidable combo clinically. And you could say the same thing about shockwave or a good laser. They all go well with your adjusting. So those are also good tools. Now, there's a whole big broad category of nutrition, functional medicine that is a big area of study, and boy, there's a big need for that in the world right now. But if you go back to my original point of rule out bad stuff, mobility, stability, biochemistry, other, that biochemistry piece is your nutrition piece, and that is so important and clinically gives you so many more tools. So that is a long-winded answer to a simple question. But what I would say for me personally, my next step after palpate and adjust would be DNS. That's for me personally. And then very closely behind that would be some kind of a soft tissue technique. and then you can keep adding things as you go. But create the foundation first. Long answer, but it's a complicated question, and everyone has to give their own individual answer to that. Thanks for asking.
Okay, Mark, tell us when the next MPI seminars are coming up.
We have some classes coming up March 21st and 22nd in Daytona. We have our sports summit, our annual sports summit. We have Dr. Winchester along with myself, and we have Dr. Cody Demack from Parker University. We're going to talk about hip mobility and low back mobility and stability and some strength training stuff, some DNS, some adjusting. So it'll be a really good mix of topics in Daytona on March 21st and 22nd. I'm going to be teaching MPI Spine at University of Bridgeport on April 11 and 12. That's the first time we will be doing that at Bridgeport in a long time. So I'm looking forward to that. And then in June, we have MPI Disc in Chicago, and we have Dr. Winchester, and we have Dr. Tom Lotus, and myself. So we will be teaching that. The three of us will be teaching MPI Disc in Chicago, and it will be at National University. So we hope to see you at some of these upcoming classes, and thank you for the opportunity to talk about this.
All right, Kevin. So our fourth question here of the Student Business Show today regarding communication. We are talking today about, properly communicating that treatment plan, especially around things like tissue healing that you have some great insight on.
Yeah, I want to give credit to Dr. Jared Bludorn. He's one of our mastermind members, and the topic of treatment planning was brought up and how a lot of evidence-based chiropractors undertreat, right? And he used the ankle sprain analogy, so I'll use that. And if you look up what he recommended, which was pretty cool, was almost all these conditions have what the recommended healing time is, right? So an ankle sprain might be 6 to 8 weeks before it heals. And that is common, and that's where the tissue healing rate is going to be. And so he takes that information, goes into the treatment plan room with that patient to discuss, say, the report of findings. And I thought it was a really good way of doing it. I'm going to break that down today because what's happening is, I'm just going to use the ankle sprain throughout this whole thing, but you can apply it to headaches, back strains, whatever, disc injuries. And a lot of chiropractors would take that ankle sprain and say, okay, come in 2 times a week for 2 weeks, right? So that's 2 weeks, that's 4 visits, and we'll see how it goes. Now, the problem with that is that patient is thinking, okay, I'm in here for 4 visits, right? And that's all I should be better, right? And that term better is a loaded term. Are they out of pain? Maybe, right? But did we heal the tissues appropriately? And that's a big problem where we see with these 2 weeks, and now if you didn't get them feeling better, you definitely didn't get the tissue healing where you wanted it to. You're setting yourself up for failure because now they're like, oh, I got to keep coming in. I thought it was going to be done in 2 weeks, right? So the way Jared had mentioned it was, you go in there and say, okay, we got a grade 2 ankle sprain. The typical medical guidelines of tissue healing and recovery rate for this is 6 to 8 weeks. Okay, my goal is to see you 2 times a week for the next 4 weeks. So I want to cut this in half, right? So my goal with my treatment, first goal here is, when we talk to this patient, is decrease healing time. Okay. So in their mind, they're saying, okay, this is a 6 to 8 week injury. And now I just told them, if we do everything right, we can decrease this recovery time in half. That's a key step, which I think is really important. And I liked how that was framed, because now you're comparing, in their mind, you say, okay, this is a 6 to 8 week injury, and you're telling them 4 weeks. They're comparing 4 weeks to 6 to 8. This is a win for me as the patient. Versus if they thought it was 2 weeks and it ends up being 4 weeks, they think of that as a loss to them. Okay, so that's key part of this, number one. Key part of it, number two, is that when you tell them it's 6 to 8 weeks for the tissue healing and recovery, and why they need to stick with treatment for, say, that 4 weeks, is that we need to make sure the tissue is healing, because sometimes the pain, and a lot of you can attest to this, the ankle sprain is a great analogy because everybody can picture it, is that in a few weeks, the pain could be gone in the ankle. But is that ankle stable like it should be? Could you go and play football on that ankle? Probably not, right? So that's why that person still needs treatment and rehab for that ankle sprain, even though the pain is gone. But with a lot of our other conditions, we use pain as a line of demarcation, right? So we say to that patient two things. We've already mentioned decreasing the healing time, but we want to make sure that we actually heal the tissues, okay? And healing the tissues is going to get them fully back to function, right? And sometimes it's the actual body part, or sometimes it's the underlying, right? So if I use the shoulder impingement syndrome one, I might be able to get that pain at the front of the shoulder better quickly, but then I fix the scapular and dysfunction or the thoracic mobility issue there. That could take a little bit of time, but we really want to correct the dysfunction, and then it's going to also make you injury resilient, because we know as an ankle sprain, one of the worst things you can do is not treat it and just let it heal, quote unquote, and the pain go away. But now they are susceptible to re-injury, and they're susceptible to kinetic chain things issue with a faulty foot ankle. We know it can happen to the knee and the hip and the low back. And so the ankle makes a good example of how you can definitely apply this to all the other stuff, low back issues, neck issues, shoulder, elbow, knee, TMD, you name it. This is the conversation you want to have with them, so that you can give them a reasonable treatment plan that's more than a few visits, so that you not only tackle pain, but you also tackle tissue healing and function. And I just thought that was a great way. In my 21 years, I hadn't heard it put that way, and I was really glad I did. And then we did a group coaching call on it, and someone went right into ChatGPT and searched like top 10 conditions chiropractors treat and what their estimated healing time is. And so now they're going to educate themselves on that. And then if it's a condition that comes into your office and you don't know what it is, go search it on AI really quickly before you get into that report of findings. So I thought that was really great communication, and I recommend you think about doing that in your future practice.
All right, Kevin, so our fifth topic here of the Student Business Show regarding career development.
Mm-hmm.
Give some advice or some information out there for students or maybe young DCs watching, talking about getting comfortable being uncomfortable.
Yeah, I think when you signed up to be a chiropractor, and just honestly, every career is like this now, is the more pain you can take, the better. And I say that kind of jokingly, but it's going to be uncomfortable at times. And what made me think about this was, in our last mastermind, we have a husband-wife couple that tackled a whole lot last year, and it was everything from changing EHRs to buying their office real estate. They have a great practice, been doing it for 10 plus years, and last year was just a hard year, very productive, right? Mm-hmm. So sometimes uncomfortable looks like this is a bad situation and I got to get it figured out. That's going to happen. If you practice for 40 years, there's going to be times like that. We had wisdom sessions from our more seasoned veterans in our mastermind, and that was one of the things. We had one doc, their practice burned down physically. We had another one that had lost all their stock portfolio in the .com bubble in 2000, which the Chiro students watching this might not have been born there yet, but that was a big one in our lives. It was 2000, it was the .com. But so uncomfortable can happen when things get hard and it's a bad situation, and you got to be able to overcome that. But sometimes it's uncomfortable to grow, and it's uncomfortable to take on something really big that has uncertainty, like this particular chiropractor in our group did. But it was such a big win for them in 2025. Like, to look back at that year as like such a huge momentum for them in their career, but it was not easy. And a lot of people would have shied away from it and retreated from it. So you'll see sometimes when people get uncomfortable, when it's a bad situation, they retreat, or when it could potentially be a really good situation, they retreat also. And so you just got to get comfortable with being uncomfortable in this career. It's even small things like patient interactions sometimes aren't great, right? Or results you're getting with that particular patient that you wish you could get them to achieve isn't getting there. So sometimes it's the day-to-day, like death by 1,000 cuts, and then sometimes it's the big one. So I just, a little bit word of wisdom now that I'm in my 21st year is the sooner you can get comfortable with getting uncomfortable, the bigger things you'll do.
Now that you're getting a taste of understanding what ethical chiropractic business is all about, head on over to the Chiropractic Success Academy to check out our special student discount and continue your business development. You can visit CSA at csacircle.com to find out more.